Hello Stitchlings, and welcome to Accused of Stitchcraft. I am here today to give you your one-stop shop video for everything you need to master your crochet basics. I know there are lots of tutorials out there, and when I was learning, I felt like I just couldn't find everything I needed in one tutorial to get me started, so that's what I'm here today to show you. Now, the basics I'm teaching you today will apply to all types of crochet, but mainly working you towards making some just working in a row for things like beanies and other wearables. And I will have lots of tutorials in the future, but let's just get you started on how to crochet something. I am going to start today by teaching you how to do a slip knot that puts the yarn on your hook, how to chain, and then how you work across the rows in general, along with a couple basic crochet stitches, the single crochet, and my personal favorite, the half double crochet. Okay, let's talk about what you need to get you started. The first thing you are going to need is some yarn. I highly recommend getting some beginner yarn. This yarn was literally called Great Yarn for Beginners on Amazon. And the best part about this yarn is that it keeps all those stringy things inside this tube so that your yarn's not splitting on you. It really helps you when you're learning in the beginning to not be getting tangled up in the yarn. So I definitely would invest in a beginner yarn just for when you're getting started, and it still makes some really cute stuff. You're also going to need a crochet hook. If you are going to buy any crochet hook in the beginning, I would get a 5mm hook. She is your go-to girl. Great for almost any project, and you can really use it with most yarns. You'll also need some scissors, I have these little pinchy kind, and some stitch markers. These are amazing. You need to use them. They will save you, especially when you're working in rows and even when you're making plushies, which I will make another tutorial on. All right, let's get you started on your slip knot. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take your working end, that's the one attached to the rest of your yarn that you're going to keep working from, and you're going to wrap it over the end of your yarn so that you have a little loop. Then you are going to insert your hook, wrap it around, and pull through and tighten. Now, just to give you a little bit of tips about how you hold that, when I wrap my yarn over, I like to pinch it here over where I crossed it, and I like to use my other fingers to kind of hold that yarn out. Now, another way you can remember this, and this is still how I say it in my head, is to stab it, go over the top and strangle it, scoop out its guts, and pull tight. Once you've pulled tight this way, you can hold the end of your yarn and pull your working yarn up to tighten it onto the hook. I'll show you that one more time. Folding it over, pinching, holding the rest of the yarn up, stabbing, strangling, scooping out the guts. Pull tight, hold your bottom, pull tight. And that is your slip knot. This is how you're going to get started on things when a pattern says chain this many at the beginning. What they mean to say is you need a slip knot to get started before you start chaining. Now that you have your slip knot, you are going to start to chain. The way I like to chain is I like to hold the end of my yarn and pinch my working yarn between these two fingers. There's a lot of different grips out there, some of them that are better for your hands than the way that I'm doing it. This was the easiest way for me to learn as a beginner, and now I've just kind of stuck with it. So, to chain, you're going to wrap around and grab your yarn and pull it through. Wrap around, pull through. And that is how you chain. Now I want you to go ahead and chain 6. I can see here that I have 3 chain stitches because I can see these little V's each V is a stitch. So I have 1, 2, 3 chain stitches, 4, 5, 6. Now I want to make a 5 by 5 square, but I had you change Now I want to make a 5 by 5 square, but the reason I had you chain 6 is because when you are working in a row, there is something called a turning chain. And a turning chain is to move your work up to the next row. When you are working in a single crochet, you are only going to chain once because a single crochet is not a very tall stitch. As you get into taller stitches, you start to chain more. And I will talk about those when I'm talking about other stitches in different tutorials. But for this one where we're going to start in single crochet, we are only going to chain 1. So I went ahead and added a 6th chain to my foundation. And I am not going to I'm not going to work into this chain closest to my hook because that's my turning chain. I'm going to move into the next chain. I'm going to insert my hook into it, yarn over, pull a loop through so that I have 2 loops on my hook. I'm going to yarn over again and pull through both loops. That is my first single crochet. And before you go throwing your work into the air and celebrating, make sure you mark that stitch. So you're going to take that stitch marker and you're going to insert it into that little hole so that it goes through both sides of your stitch and then lock it into place. Because when you're working in rows, it's really easy for that last stitch to get tucked away and for you to not see it. And if you've ever attempted crochet before and your work starts to get smaller, it's because you're accidentally dropping those end stitches. So it's really important to mark those. Now I can see this stitch has already been worked into. There's a really big hole. So I'm going to move into the next stitch, insert my hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over again, and pull through both loops. That's my second single crochet. I'm going to keep going across until I have 5 single crochets. 3, 4, 5. I am at the end of my work. Now that I'm at the end of my work, it's time to turn my work because I can't keep working this way. I have nothing to work into. So I am going to flip my work over and I want to start working this way. But before I can do that, I have to do that turning chain to move my work up a row. So I am going to chain 1 because I'm working in single crochet before I start single crocheting across. Now that I have chained 1, I can insert my hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through both loops. Now this is my first single crochet of this row. So I'm also going to mark on this side, just so I don't accidentally drop that stitch. And I'm going to single crochet across again. Now I'm at the stitch that my marker's in, and do you see how it's even kind of drooping off to the side? Sometimes it gets really hard to see that, so I'm very glad that I marked it. And sometimes I will take that stitch marker out, but when I was first starting, I was so worried that I would take that marker out and not be able to see where the stitch was. So I would go ahead and just insert my hook where the stitch marker is. Sometimes it's a little tricky, but just so I knew I wasn't accidentally gonna drop that. And I would finish my last single crochet and then take out that stitch marker. Just to be 100% sure. You'll get better over time and you won't need to do that. Now we have gone back and forth 3 times now. So we had our original chain, and then we have 2 rows of single crochet. And so you can see that here's our foundation chain that we started with. And then you can see 2 V's. So there's a V here, kind of like upside down, and then there's a V going right side up here. So we can see we have our chain row and 1 row of single crochet, 2 rows completed. Now, if that's hard for you to see, that's totally fine. Even as I've become more experienced, sometimes it's hard for me to see or I'm too lazy to count it that way. So sometimes I will take a little notebook and I'll just make some circles like, oh, this is how many rows I need to do. And I will check off each one as I go back and forth, just to make it a little bit easier on my brain. So, again, I'm at the end of the row, which means I have to turn my work. And before I can start working across, I need to chain 1 and start working my single crochet. Once I've done my first single crochet of that row, I'm going to mark it with my stitch marker and work across again. Work into the one with the stitch marker just to be extra careful. Now I'll pop out that stitch marker. I'm at the end of the row. I'm going to turn my work, chain 1, work my single crochet. And if you're having trouble seeing where to work that single crochet, you have 2 lines here. Inserting your hook between those 2 lines. That's my first single crochet of this row. I'm going to mark it and work across again. Now let's imagine you are done working on this piece and you would like to now keep this. Crochet frogs really easy, and frogging is a term because when you pull the yarn, depending on the yarn it is, it can make a sound kind of like a frog ribbiting, and so they call it frogging. But crochet frogs really easily. It unravels very easily just by pulling, which is nice if you need to go back in your work, but also can make it so your work comes apart easily. So we are going to do something called fastening off. Fastening off is where you are going to chain 1, and you're going to cut and leave about 6 inches off the end of your work. You are going to then just pull it on your hook through and tighten this up, and it will make a little knot at the end of your work. Now, this isn't totally fail-safe. You should always weave in your ends to your work, but we're not at that point yet of doing that. I will show you that in another tutorial, how to weave in your ends. But really, we're just focusing on some basics right now, learning to work back and forth. Now, if you make this a little bit bigger, you do some more stitches, you can make yourself a cute little coaster. But that is how you work single crochet in rows. We are going to slip knot just like we did before, and you're amazing at it because you've practiced. And we are going to chain 7 this time. We still want a 5x5 swatch, but remember how I told you those turning chains have to be as long as the stitch that you're using. A single crochet we use to chain 1, a half double crochet needs 2 turning chains. So if I want something to be 5 stitches long, I'm going to have to add 2 as my turning chain. Now, instead of skipping just the hook or just the stitch closest to our hook, we're going to skip 2. Remember, we want that turning chain to be 2 stitches. Now for a half double crochet, you're going to yarn over before you insert your hook. I'm skipping 2 turning chains, inserting my hook, yarning over, pulling up a loop. You should have 3 loops on your hook. You're going to yarn over and pull through all 3. Go ahead and mark your first half double crochet. And keep going. Yarn over, insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through all 3. Now when you get to the end of your row, you're going to turn your work just like you learned before, but instead of just chaining 1, we're doing half double crochet, so we're going to chain 2. 1, 2. Now you want to make sure you skip those 2, those are your turning chains. Yarn over, skip those 2, and you're working into the V here. These side V's, you can see them on top too. You're working through the side of them. Skipping these 2 turning chains, insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through all 3. And this is my first stitch of my second row. So I'm going to insert my stitch marker again. Working across. I'm at the end of the row, so I'm going to flip my work. I'm going to chain 1, 2, skip those 2, and continue on. I'm gonna go ahead and work 5 rows of this just to show you the difference between the 2 stitches. Now you can see how much taller a half double crochet is. So if you want a project to work up faster, you want to choose taller stitches. But again, I like how tight these stitches are compared to other stitches, which I will show in future videos. But if you keep practicing these basics, you are well on your way to making some really cool projects, even things like tapestries or wall hangings. You just need these basics to do, and you can do those patterns. That is it for this tutorial, but please leave any comments below with questions you have about what I showed, or comments about what other things you would like to learn from me. I really want you to be able to be successful on your crochet journey, and I am here to help you with that. You can also find me on Instagram and TikTok at Accused of Stitchcraft. And please feel free to send me messages on there. If you also would like to look at some patterns that I have for sale, those are listed on my Etsy and my Ravelry, which are linked in my link tree in my bio. Thanks so much. Bye.